Can we face the world when all we have is a prosthetic leg and a heart full of loneliness? Eli Hart, a boy who lives in wealth but lacks love. With a heavy prosthetic leg and a heart full of wounds, Eli feels like a shadow in his family and among his peers. But everything changed when Anna, a small yet brave girl, came into Eli's life bringing hope and true friendship. Can the boy overcome his pain, his inner wounds, and rise up to find himself? Eli's story about friendship and personal growth will make you believe that no matter how cold the world is, there are always those who will stand by our weakest parts. Join me as we explore this emotional journey in today's video. Eli Hart sat motionless on the school bench, staring at the clouds hanging in the autumn sky. The characteristic gray-blue hue covered the sky over Atlanta, much like the mood in his heart. The 6-year-old boy, small in size with a heavy prosthetic leg that had just been adjusted recently, took each step with the uncomfortable sound of squeaking. It felt like a constant reminder of his difference, a difference he always tried to hide. His heart felt heavy, as though an invisible debt was clinging to him, one he could never repay. He lived in a grand mansion surrounded by gardens with a bedroom large enough to fit an entire family. But despite the beauty and luxury of it all, Eli felt more alone than ever. The house, perfect on the outside, was devoid of any real love. Everything there felt cold. His stepmother, Vivian, was always distant and strict. His father, Marcus Hart, a famous billionaire, with endless meetings, seldom had time for his son. Each day, Eli only received a quick nod from his father as he walked out the door, and reminders about studying and maintaining the family image from his stepmother. Every day when the bell rang, signaling recess, Eli would walk out to the playground, trying not to pay attention to the strange looks and whispered comments around him. The other kids at school couldn't understand how he felt. He was the boy with the prosthetic leg, one of those things they couldn't comprehend. When Eli tried to join in games, no one would play with him. The other kids looked at him like an outsider, and he wondered, why do I have to live like this? Maybe he just wanted one true friend, someone who understood how he felt, but all he got was rejection and snickering behind his back. The feeling of loneliness was something Eli had learned to live with a long time ago. But each passing day, it became heavier. He never spoke of it, but in his heart, every time he walked, it felt like he was carrying an unshakable burden. Seeing his classmates laugh and play together, a silent pain would rise within Eli. Not because he couldn't join them, but because he knew that even if he could, no one would truly want to be his friend. Each time Eli tried to join a group, they would find ways to push him out. One of the kids in class, Jake Montgomery, the unofficial leader of the group, was always at the forefront of bullying Eli. That boy would mock him, ridicule him for his prosthetic leg. "You're a robot," Jake once mocked him crudely when Eli tripped and fell. Eli tried not to care about those words, but his heart, no matter how strong, still hurt. Every time Eli would just shrink inward, telling himself he had to be stronger, that he had to learn to face the truth, that he would never be like the other kids and would never have the empathy he longed for. At lunchtime, Eli would sit alone in a corner of the schoolyard, eating the lunch prepared early in the morning. His lunchbox always contained food that his stepmother, Vivian, deemed healthy: rice, boiled fish, and vegetables. There were no choices, no love in each meal. He didn't dare ask for anything else, knowing his stepmother wouldn't be pleased. He could only eat silently, with tears flowing inwardly, unseen by anyone. Everything in his life was calculated, planned out perfectly, like a management program. But what he needed was not that perfection. He needed a real family, a friend who understood him, and unconditional love. There was only one thing that made Eli feel a little better during those long breaks. It was when he could look at the wristwatch his father had given him. Marcus was rarely home, but every time he returned, the expensive gifts were the only way he showed his love for Eli. Eli didn't know why, but whenever he looked at the watch, he felt a strange warmth, as though his father truly loved him. But those were just fleeting moments, not enough to erase the loneliness in him. He longed for a real connection, a relationship that wasn't measured in money and material gifts. But in a world filled with such extravagance, he felt too small and lost. One afternoon, as the pale light of the sunset began to cover the schoolyard, Eli stood up, limping away from the playground, silently heading toward the main building. His prosthetic legs squeaked with each heavy step, but no one noticed. Eli felt like a ghost passing through the crowd. No matter how many people were around, he always felt alone and out of place. When he arrived home, Eli took off his shoes and entered his room. The bedroom was still the same, silent and cold, with the objects around him never changing. He walked over to his desk, sat down, and opened a book. But his mind couldn't focus on the words. The stories in the book only made him feel more lost. A feeling of helplessness surged within him, as though life had no meaning if no one truly cared about him. But then Eli absent-mindedly looked at the watch on his wrist. It was the only moment that made him feel a little hope. He tightly held the watch, telling himself, "One day, I will find people who truly understand me." Eli never thought that one day he would find a friend. He had lived in loneliness for so long that he couldn't imagine anyone outside of his family understanding how he felt. But everything changed the day a small girl with dark skin and neatly braided hair stepped into his life. That morning, the sun shone gently, and it was a day like any other. Eli went to school as usual, limping with each step, the prosthetic leg creaking with every movement, making him feel more different than ever. He didn't want to think about it, but with every step, it felt like a reminder of the loneliness that weighed on his heart. As always, Eli sat at his usual table in the corner of the playground, a spot he had often occupied alone. He quietly opened the lunchbox his stepmother Vivian had prepared, but the food was hardly appetizing. He watched the other kids laughing and gathering in groups, and his heart sank. They never paid attention to him. And if they did, it was only with strange looks, a mixture of pity and curiosity. Eli had grown accustomed to this, but today was different. As he nibbled on a slice of bread with a little cheese, a soft but determined voice came from behind him. "Are you sitting here alone?" Eli turned around, his eyes widening in surprise. The girl standing before him was a new face, one he had never seen at school before. She had dark, smooth skin, her hair neatly braided, and her bright eyes sparkling with curiosity. She smiled at Eli, a smile that seemed completely fearless. "What are you eating?" the girl asked, her curious gaze stopping on Eli's lunchbox. Eli was slightly taken aback. He had never had anyone ask him that question before. The other kids always kept their distance, and some even mocked him for his prosthetic leg. But this girl was different. She didn't care about what he had. She only cared about what he was doing. I'm eating rice," Eli replied awkwardly, not sure what else to say. He wasn't used to talking to strangers, especially when they smiled at him so kindly. The girl nodded, then sat down next to Eli, not at all concerned with the fact that he was sitting alone. "I'm Anna," she introduced herself, extending her hand toward Eli. "And you?" Eli stared at her hand for a moment, then finally shook it. "Eli," he replied, still feeling a little shy. "Hi, Anna." "Eli, that's a nice name," Anna said, smiling brightly, making the air around Eli seem a little warmer. "So do you sit here often?" "Alone?" Eli didn't answer right away. He nodded, a feeling of unease rising in his chest. "Yeah, I usually sit here alone." Anna looked at Eli for a moment, then softly asked, "Why do you sit alone? Doesn't anyone play with you?" At that moment, Eli could no longer hide the emotions inside. He looked down at the ground, trying to conceal the pain that was creeping into his heart. No one wants to play with me, he said quietly. I'm different. Anna was silent for a moment, then suddenly said, "But I don't think you're different at all. Everyone is different in their own way. It's just that we can't always see those differences." Eli looked up into Anna's bright eyes, and her words made him feel a little warmth spread through his chest. He had never felt like anyone truly understood him. Though he never said it, he always felt like an outsider in this world. "Why did you come over here?" Eli asked, unable to hide the curiosity in his voice. "Aren't you scared they'll make fun of you?" Anna shook her head gently. "Why should I be scared? Everyone has the right to do what they want, without worrying about what others say. If I were scared, I would never dare to do anything." Anna's words were like a wake-up call in Eli's soul. He suddenly realized that perhaps he had been living too long in fear, in loneliness, and in the mocking words of others. But Anna, this girl, was different. She wasn't scared at all. And maybe, just maybe, he didn't have to be scared anymore. "Thank you," Eli said, his voice softer. "You're the first person who's talked to me like this." Anna smiled and looked at Eli with a gentle expression. "It's nothing, Eli. You deserve a true friend. And I think we will be friends." A warm feeling spread through Eli's chest as he heard those words. He had never had anyone speak to him like that, never felt the sincerity in someone's eyes before. Anna was not just a stranger, she brought Eli a new hope. A hope that, maybe, just maybe, he wouldn't have to live in loneliness forever. From that day on, every lunchtime, Anna and Eli always sat together. They didn't just have lunch together, but also talked, sharing stories about life, about family, about the small dreams each one had. Little by little, Anna became an inseparable part of Eli's world. She understood him, listened to him, and most importantly, she never abandoned him. Eli never thought that such an ordinary meeting could change his life. But gradually he realized that a true friend could make everything different. Anna was not just a new friend, but a small light shining in Eli's dark world, making him feel like he was no longer alone. Since then, Eli's steps became lighter. Even though his prosthetic leg was still there, he no longer felt separated from the world around him. Anna gave him a reason to smile, and more importantly, a reason to believe that even in the darkness, there are always shining stars. From that point on, lunch breaks were no longer times when he had to face loneliness. And every day, every step he took, Eli knew there was someone who understood and stood by him. Anna, his first real friend, gave him the strength to face the world outside. Eli felt the soft light of autumn as he walked into school that morning. He no longer felt the weight of loneliness pressing down on him like before. Because since Anna had entered his life, everything had changed. He had a friend, someone who truly understood him, and that made each day a little easier. But like in every story, there were challenges, and Eli never imagined he would have to face bullies in this way. He remembered the times before. Every time he walked into the schoolyard, the laughter and mocking words always followed him. Those kids never stopped hurting him in one way or another. But today, he felt something different. Anna, the girl who had shared lunch breaks and important moments with him, was still by his side today, like a friend who would never leave. As Eli and Anna approached the playground, a burst of laughter came from the right side. Eli immediately knew it was those kids, the ones he had been familiar with for so long. They were the kids in class, always siding with the strong, always looking down on the weak, and Eli was their familiar target. This time, they weren't just mocking Eli, but also throwing jabs at Anna. 3 boys, including David the leader, stood a few steps away from Eli and Anna. They looked at him with disdain, as if to challenge his presence in this space. "Well, look here, the one with one leg, and the little friend." David laughed loudly, his voice filled with malice. He's got a friend now, who a poor little girl like you. Eli felt a wave of anger rising within him, but he tried to hold it back. Anna, standing beside him, could feel the tension in the air. She wasn't scared. On the contrary, she stepped forward, her gaze sharp as she faced the group of boys. He's not the one-legged boy, he's Eli, and I'm his friend, Anna said, her voice confident and determined. David raised an eyebrow and smirked as though trying to provoke her. A friend? A friend of someone as weak as him? He's got a prosthetic leg, Anna. He'll never be like us. He can't play like us. He's just trash. David's words, along with the mockery from his friends, felt like daggers to Eli's heart. He was exhausted. The years of enduring bullying had made him hypersensitive, and David's words made the pain inside him even deeper. But this time, something different stirred in Eli. He didn't want to step back anymore. He didn't want to be the weak one anymore. Anna's eyes never wavered from the group, as if she were burning away their arrogance with her gaze. You guys think you're so strong. If that's the case, why do you have to pick on those weaker than you? She said. You're not strong, you're just cowards, hiding behind cruel words. If you were truly strong, you wouldn't need to push others down to feel better about yourselves. Anna's words were like a slap in their faces. The kids fell silent for a moment, not knowing what to say next. But David, unable to bear the challenge from such a small girl, stepped forward, his face full of contempt. Oh, this girl's got some guts. But do you know what? Here we don't need weak people like him, David said, pointing at Eli. He's got no leg, so what if he has a friend? He'll never change. But Anna didn't back down. She stepped forward, standing in front of Eli to protect him, even as David and his group tried to look at her with defiant eyes. Yeah, Eli has a prosthetic leg, but at least he knows how to stand up when he gets knocked down. What about you guys? You only know how to hurt others for fun. You're the real weak ones, Anna asserted without fear. At that moment, Eli couldn't stay silent anymore. He couldn't let Anna face them alone. He stood up, feeling a new strength rising within him, despite the prosthetic leg still being there. He stood tall, looking into David's eyes and those of his accomplices. His eyes now held no fear, only resolve. You can laugh at me, you can mock me for my prosthetic leg, but you will never make me feel worthless. Eli said, his voice calm but firm. I don't need your acceptance to know I'm valuable. And Anna, she's the first friend who doesn't see me as weak. You can keep mocking, but I won't stand still anymore. The whole schoolyard fell silent, and Eli's words didn't get lost in the wind like before. He wasn't just standing up for himself, but for Anna, for the respect and friendship she had shown him. David, after a moment of hesitation, finally shrugged and waved his hand as if to end the confrontation. Forget it. Don't waste time with people like them, he said, pulling his friends away. The group of kids walked off, leaving Eli and Anna standing there, feeling the heavy silence after the confrontation. But this time, Eli didn't feel hurt anymore. He felt like he had won a great inner battle. Not because he had beaten the bullies, but because he had stood up for himself. Anna turned to look at Eli, her eyes shining with pride. You did great, she said. You didn't let them make you afraid anymore. Eli felt warmth spreading inside him. Anna's words were a confirmation that he no longer had to endure loneliness and fear. He had a real friend now. Someone who not only stood by him, but also gave him the strength to face life's challenges. He looked into Anna's eyes and smiled. Thank you for always being there for me. Anna smiled back, and the two continued walking through the schoolyard, no longer fearing the bullies. Eli understood that no matter what challenges he had to face, he would never be alone. Both Eli and Anna stood silently watching the bullies' retreating figures, the sound of their heavy footsteps growing faint. Eli felt a strange new sensation inside, not fear or hurt like before, but a strong feeling, as if a huge stone had been lifted from his shoulders. For the first time, Eli didn't feel weak. He felt strong enough to face any challenge, not only because he had an amazing friend like Anna, but because the determination had risen in his heart. Anna turned to Eli, a proud smile on her face. "You're amazing. Never let them make you feel unworthy. You're strong, Eli." Eli smiled shyly, the warmth from Anna's words like a small flame inside him. He felt he was no longer alone. With Anna by his side, life seemed brighter, even though the world outside was still full of challenges and difficulties. Suddenly, a voice interrupted Eli's thoughts. "Oh, how touching." "You guys did great," a mocking voice rang out. The two turned around, and this time it was David. He stood there, his smile dripping with contempt. After his group had walked off, he seemed unable to resist the chance to continue taunting them. "Look at that, the one-legged kid and the girl." "You think what you did was impressive," David said, his eyes raised in challenge. Eli felt the anger suddenly rise in him. But this time it wasn't the feeling of helplessness it once was. He felt that David's words no longer had the power to hurt him. He looked into David's eyes, his gaze different from before, no longer fearful, but calm and resolute. "We don't need your acceptance," Eli replied, his voice still gentle but firm. "And I don't need to do anything to please you. I live my life, not yours." David stood there for a moment, staring at Eli in surprise. He didn't expect Eli to react like that. He was used to mocking and making Eli step back. But this time that didn't happen. A second later, David sneered. "Oh, looks like you've learned to talk back now," he said. But his eyes still held contempt. "But that doesn't mean you'll be respected. You'll always be beneath me." Eli didn't respond, but his silence was a strong answer. Anna stood beside him, her fists clenched, but she remained calm. "Want to keep provoking us?" "Go ahead," Anna said, her voice stronger than ever. "But you'll never make us feel inferior. Everyone has their own worth, and you don't have the right to decide anyone else's value." David curled his lip, but this time he said nothing more. He turned and quickly walked away with his accomplices. Eli and Anna stood still, feeling the air settle. They had overcome a big challenge, and no matter what happened, they knew they would never have to endure that kind of contempt again. The two continued walking, never looking back. Anna glanced at Eli, her eyes lighting up as if they had just won a victory. "You know, Eli," Anna said, "I think we learned something important today. Sometimes strength doesn't come from winning in physical fights, but from standing up and protecting yourself, even when the people around you don't understand." Eli looked up at her, and a smile appeared on his face. "Thank you for always being there for me, Anna. I don't know what I would do without you." Anna laughed, the sound like sunshine breaking through dark clouds. "That's what friends do for each other, right?" The two continued walking towards the schoolyard. But this time everything felt different. They no longer had heavy, anxious steps. Everything felt lighter, easier, because they had overcome a challenge, and most importantly, they had stood strong together. At lunchtime, Anna and Eli sat together under a tree, enjoying a simple but warm meal. They didn't speak much, but their presence was enough to make everything feel more comfortable than ever. "Today," Anna said, her voice softening, "you really changed, Eli. You stood up. You're no longer that scared boy." Eli looked into Anna's eyes, and for the first time in his life, he felt strong enough to face the world. He had learned the most important lesson life could teach him. Nothing is impossible to overcome as long as there is true friendship and courage. In Eli's heart, a new belief had been lit. He was not weak, and he would never let anyone tell him he wasn't good enough. He would never tolerate bullying, and he would never let anyone walk all over him. And most importantly, he had Anna, a friend who would stand by him through the next challenges. That day, Eli not only learned how to stand strong, but also how to believe in himself. Eli entered the classroom with a heavy heart. Although he had successfully confronted David and the bullies, he still felt a restless stirring inside. The looks from the kids in class were no longer the same, no more blatant pity or disdain. But what Eli felt most clearly was the silence, the cold distance. The unspoken looks made his heart feel lonely and out of place. He wasn't sure how much longer he could endure it. Eli's seat was at the back of the class, near the window. He always tried to sit alone, avoiding the curious gazes, avoiding the attention of others. Next to him was an empty desk. Anna usually sat beside him, but today she wasn't in class. Eli tried not to dwell too much on her absence, though in his heart there was a slight emptiness. The bell rang, and Mrs. Harper entered wearing a friendly smile that Eli couldn't find warmth in. Today there was a small test, and as usual, Eli felt the tension spreading throughout his body. Tests were always a nightmare for him, not only because he didn't feel smart enough, but also due to the anxiety about making mistakes, about not being able to answer the questions. As the rest of the class began the test, Eli picked up his pen and looked at the paper. Every question seemed blurry, but he forced himself to focus. He closed his eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath, trying to calm the tension within. However, a sharp pain suddenly shot through his left leg. It was the prosthetic leg that Eli had worn since he was very young, and although he had become accustomed to it every time he walked or stood for long periods, a pain like a knife stabbing him would make him nearly unbearable. This pain was indescribable, but he knew it was a sign that something was wrong. Eli put his pen down, biting his lip to stop himself from crying out. He tried to focus on the test, but the pain lingered, throbbing throughout the lesson. He couldn't help but think back to the previous times when this pain had appeared more frequently, and each time it made him feel abandoned, neglected. The pain stirred the self-doubt within him, like a ghost haunting his soul. After the test was over, Eli hurried out of the classroom. He knew he needed to go to the nurse's office to check his prosthetic, but there was an odd hesitation in his heart. He didn't want anyone to know about the pain, didn't want anyone to discover that he couldn't face the truth about his prosthetic leg. He didn't want to be a burden to anyone, didn't want to be seen as weak. But the pain wouldn't let go. It grew sharper with each step, and Eli couldn't pretend like nothing was wrong. He hurried his right leg, staggering as he tried to walk fast, but his left leg couldn't keep up. He tried to be patient, but his steps became unsteady and slow. When he entered the nurse's office, he saw the nurse sitting at the desk, and a look of surprise flashed across her face when she saw him walk in, grimacing. "Eli, what's wrong?" The nurse asked, her voice warm, but with a hint of concern. "Do you feel unwell?" Eli could only lower his head, unable to hide the pain anymore. "My leg hurts again," he said softly. "I think my prosthetic needs adjusting." The nurse glanced at Eli's leg and noticed something unusual. "Let me check it for you," she said gently. She slowly removed Eli's prosthetic leg, inspecting the parts and beginning her examination. Not long after, she looked up with a serious expression. "Eli," she said, "your prosthetic leg has been adjusted incorrectly many times. It's possible that due to the previous repairs, the parts no longer fit together properly. The pain you're feeling is because the leg no longer fits your body. This pain is a warning about that." Eli felt as though his heart dropped. Every word from the nurse hit him like a hammer. He knew he had to face the truth. The prosthetic he had used all these years was not a tool that helped him live normally. It was a temporary fix, imperfect, not properly cared for or adjusted. The nurse continued, "I'll call the doctor and request a thorough examination. You need a full adjustment to your prosthetic so you can walk easily and without this pain. Eli sat still, a sense of despair rising within him. He couldn't believe he had to face this disappointment. The feelings he had always avoided were now out in the open, leaving him unable to deceive himself anymore. His leg wasn't right, and he didn't know if everything could return to normal. The nurse gently patted Eli's shoulder as if to comfort him. "Don't worry too much, Eli. I'll help you. We'll find a way to make you better." But despite what the nurse said, Eli still felt trapped in a cage. He didn't feel like a normal person anymore, just an imperfect machine that couldn't exist peacefully in this world. When he left the nurse's office, Eli just wanted to hide in some corner where no one could see his weakness. But there was something inside him that wouldn't let him do that. He couldn't keep running away. Eli knew that no matter how difficult it was, he had to face the truth. He took a deep breath and walked slowly. The pain was still there, but this time maybe it was a reminder. He couldn't keep living in self-deception. He couldn't keep hiding in the darkness of himself. He had to face the truth. He had to make himself stronger. As he left the school gates, Eli saw Anna waiting outside. She was smiling, but when she saw Eli, her smile slowly faded. "What's wrong?" Anna asked, her voice full of concern. Eli couldn't hide it anymore, and this time he didn't need to. "My leg," he said, his voice small and weak. "My prosthetic leg isn't right. It's hurting me." Anna stepped closer. Her eyes filled with worry and empathy. She placed a hand on his shoulder and gently said, "Don't worry, Eli. You'll get through this. Everything will be okay. I'll help you." Eli looked into her eyes, feeling warmth and steadiness. Even though he felt like he was sinking into pain, Anna's gaze was like a shining light in the darkness. He knew that at least he wasn't facing all of this alone. But deep down, Eli knew that the journey ahead wouldn't be easy. The pain and fear would still follow him. But at least with Anna, with real friends, he could find the strength to overcome it. Eli and Anna stood together, looking at each other silently for a moment, filled with emotion. He could feel the concern in Anna's eyes, but the fears still hadn't let go of him. Everything he had known about his prosthetic leg seemed to be fading away. The pain still gripped his body as though it was a part of him, inseparable. "You'll be fine, Eli," Anna said again, this time her voice more determined. "I believe everything will pass." Eli could only nod, but inside a feeling of helplessness rose within him. The feeling he had always tried to hide was now fully exposed. He felt as if he were being pushed away from everyone, as if he didn't belong here. The painful mornings from the prosthetic leg, the weary afternoons when entering the classroom, it all felt like a trap he couldn't escape from. When they arrived at the doctor's waiting room, Eli sat down in a chair. His hands clenched tightly together, trying to hold back his anxiety. The pain still lingered, as if each passing minute was a new challenge. He looked up at Anna, and this time in her eyes, there was not just concern, but also determination. "Don't worry too much," Anna said gently. "You're not alone." Eli didn't know if her comforting words would be enough to make him feel at peace. But at least it helped him feel that he had a real friend, someone who understood the pain he was going through. The door to the doctor's office opened, and a middle-aged woman, Dr. Patricia, stepped out. She smiled warmly when she saw them, but the smile couldn't hide the seriousness in her eyes. "Eli, Anna." "Hello, Dr. Patricia," said her voice warm. "Eli, why didn't you come here sooner?" Eli could only offer a weak smile, his eyes heavy. "I didn't think my leg was that bad," he whispered. "I didn't want to bother anyone." Dr. Patricia walked over to Eli, gently taking his hand. "No one thinks you're bothering us. What you're going through is very real. We'll find a way to help you, don't worry. She removed Eli's prosthetic leg and began carefully examining it. Every movement was gentle, but to Eli, each touch felt like tearing something apart in his soul. He couldn't understand why his prosthetic leg caused so much pain. But in that moment, the fear that he would have to live his entire life with an imperfect leg made him feel suffocated. Dr. Patricia said, "Your leg isn't just a support tool. It has to be a part of your body, helping you move easily and without pain. But right now, it no longer does that." Eli felt a chill run down his spine. His mind seemed numb as Dr. Patricia spoke those words. Nothing could make him feel normal anymore. His prosthetic leg wasn't a part of his body. It was an obstacle to freedom, preventing him from living the life he wanted. He looked at Anna, and she smiled, but her eyes were filled with worry. "Everything will be okay, Eli. We'll figure this out." Dr. Patricia continued, "You need to replace your prosthetic leg. It's broken and no longer fits your body. I'll contact an orthopedic specialist to make a new one for you. But before we do that, we need to check your overall health to make sure there are no other serious issues." Eli felt like everything around him was collapsing. He had no choice but to face the truth. Enter the operating room, then get a new prosthetic leg. It felt like a different life, a life he never thought he'd have to live, was upon him. When they left the clinic, Dr. Patricia promised to contact them soon. Eli felt like he had been given a new opportunity, but the anxiety about what was to come still enveloped his mind. Anna walked beside him, and although she didn't say anything more, he felt the warmth in her gaze. Eli knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Getting a new prosthetic leg wasn't just a physical change. It was a change in how he saw himself. He was no longer the weak child who had to endure his body's cruelty. He would learn how to stand up again, learn how to walk again. But would he be strong enough to overcome it all? As they stepped out of the clinic, the sky was beginning to darken. The light slowly faded, and only a faint glow from a distant streetlight remained. Eli looked at his shadow on the sidewalk, no longer seeing weakness in it. Maybe he wasn't perfect. Maybe he would stumble many times, but at least he no longer feared facing the unknown. "You'll be fine," Anna said again, this time her voice full of confidence. "You're not facing this alone." Eli smiled, feeling a little warmth in his heart. He wasn't walking alone, and that was the only thing that mattered in that moment. Eli sat in the living room of the mansion, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the armrest of his chair, his mind unable to settle. He could feel the tension in the air, as if everything was about to explode. Vivian, his strict and cold stepmother, had been putting pressure on Eli ever since he started experiencing pain from his ill-fitting prosthetic leg. With each passing day, Eli felt more of Vivian's harshness and her complete disregard for his emotions and health. That day, Marcus came home early, his face heavy with worry. Vivian sat at the dining table, a glass of water in her hand, pretending to read the newspaper with feigned concentration. As Marcus entered the room, the coldness between them was immediately palpable. Vivian didn't lift her eyes from the paper, but the silence between them was something Eli could feel deeply. "We need to talk," Marcus said, his voice deep and firm. Eli turned to look at his father. He looked different, as if he had been thinking deeply about something important. Vivian lowered the paper and glared at him defiantly. "What about?" she asked, trying to keep her voice calm, but unable to hide the tension. Marcus walked toward the dining table, his eyes flashing with determination. "About Eli, about taking care of him." He paused for a moment, then continued. "We need to replace Eli's prosthetic leg. I've spoken to the doctor, and he confirmed that the current prosthetic not only doesn't fit properly, but it's also causing harm to his body." Vivian scoffed, but there was no joy in the sound. "It's just a trivial matter," she said sarcastically. "A kid like Eli with a terrible prosthetic leg. What's he going to do with that? How can we expect anything better from him?" Eli felt as if something had pierced his chest. Vivian always spoke like that, those contemptuous words pushing him further away from the family. He looked up at his father, searching for protection. But Marcus's gaze didn't seem steady either. "Vivian, I won't accept Eli's suffering anymore." Marcus said, his voice now more resolute. "He's not just a child I need to teach. He's my son, and I have a responsibility to protect him." Vivian stood up, her face reddening with anger. "Protect him," she sneered. "Don't forget, Marcus, I'm the one who's taken care of your son all this time. Have you ever thought about what I've done for this family? Do you know the decisions I've made to keep everything stable?" Eli could feel his father's anger rising. He looked at his father with a questioning gaze. Why had Marcus let Vivian control everything like this? Why didn't anyone dare confront her, Vivian? "I can't stand how you treat Eli anymore," Marcus said, his voice firm. "He's my son, and I have the right to decide what's best for him. Not you." Vivian froze her eyes, full of surprise at Marcus's change of stance. A heavy silence followed, but the tension in the room didn't dissipate. They stared at each other like two warriors in a battle neither wanted to lose. "So, I have no value to you anymore, huh?" Vivian's voice cracked. "You only want to listen to what he says, never to me." Vivian, Marcus began, his tone hard. "Don't make me choose between you and Eli. You've had enough chances, and I can't continue letting you act like this. I'll do whatever it takes to protect Eli." Eli felt fear surge within him. He had always tried to avoid the confrontations between his father and Vivian. But this time everything had changed. He was no longer the invisible child. He was the one who had to stand up and speak the truth about what Vivian had done. "Dad." Eli spoke up, his voice trembling but full of resolve. "You don't need to do all of this. I don't want you both to fight over me anymore." Marcus turned to look at him, his eyes softening, but he still held on to his determination. "Eli, you don't have to endure this terrible situation alone. I'll always be here to protect you." Vivian stood there looking at them with eyes full of hatred, as if she couldn't stand this change. "If that's your choice," she said coldly, "then I have nothing more to say. But I won't just stand by." Marcus sighed. "Fine, Vivian. If you feel that way, I'll make my decision. I no longer need your help in taking care of Eli." Their confrontation didn't end easily, but at least Eli could sense a change in his father. Marcus had finally chosen to stand by him, something Eli had always longed for, but never dared to hope for. Vivian stormed out of the room, her eyes cold and glaring at Eli. "You'll regret this," she whispered before slamming the door. Eli felt a weight in his chest. He didn't know how to face Vivian, but at least he knew he wasn't facing this alone anymore. He had his father, and that was the most important thing. After Vivian left, Marcus sat down beside Eli. "You don't need to be afraid anymore, Eli. I'll always be by your side. Nothing can change that." Eli looked at his father for the first time, feeling a sense of peace in his heart. He didn't have to live in fear anymore. Finally, he realized he had the right to speak up, the right to demand fairness for himself. "Thank you, Dad." Eli whispered, his voice weak but full of gratitude. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Marcus smiled, giving Eli a gentle pat on the shoulder. "You've already been strong, Eli. I'm just the one helping you see that." As Marcus stood up and walked out, Eli sat alone in the living room, an unfamiliar feeling flooding his heart. He knew that the battle with Vivian had only just begun, but at least this time he didn't have to fight alone. Eli sat still in the room, his hands clenched tightly on his knees. The feeling of unease still gripped his mind, even though his father had stood by him. Vivian might have left, but the wounds she had caused wouldn't heal easily. He not only had to face her at home, but also her words, the coldness and contempt she had always reserved for him. As Marcus prepared the next steps, Eli once again found himself caught in a world he couldn't control. Every time Vivian appeared, everything changed. Whether it was her silence or the subtle remarks she made, they had the power to destroy the peace Eli was trying to build. But this time he knew he wasn't the weak child anymore. He wasn't a shadow in her eyes. Marcus had decided to seek help from a specialist regarding Eli's prosthetic leg. For the first time, Eli felt like he wasn't just a child, but an individual who had the right to live a normal life. To live without enduring pain, without the discomfort of walking every day. The next morning, Eli woke up earlier than usual. The feeling in his heart still uneasy, but a new sense of hope was starting to form. He walked outside and saw his father sitting at the dining table. Marcus looked up, his eyes filled with determination and love. Although the tension still filled the air, Eli could feel the safety in his father's eyes. Eli, Marcus said as he entered the dining room. "Today we'll meet with a doctor. This will be the first step in helping you feel better. I've found someone who can help us with this issue." Eli nodded. Although there were still many concerns, he could feel the resolve in his father's voice, and that gave him strength. That day, after walking through crowded streets, Marcus and Eli arrived at a quiet clinic. Eli felt strange as he entered a clinic that wasn't like the ones he was used to. This wasn't a fancy clinic, nor was it a place he had known with doctors Vivian had chosen for him. There was no grandeur, no harshness in the atmosphere, just a different feeling. A feeling of genuine care. Pato, the doctor Marcus had found, was a middle-aged woman with bright eyes and a kind gaze. "Hello, Eli," she said as she entered the room, her voice gentle and reassuring. "I've heard a lot about you from your father. Today we'll work together to help you feel better." Eli looked up at the doctor, still feeling uneasy. He had never been excited about changing anything about his body, especially his prosthetic leg, which he had been used to for years. But the worry slowly eased as Dr. Patel began to explain what was needed. "Your prosthetic leg doesn't fit your body, Eli. The pain you're feeling is because it wasn't designed correctly. We'll make a new one so it's more comfortable for you, and most importantly, so you won't have this pain anymore." Eli listened, not just hearing her words, but also feeling a new spark of hope growing within him. Maybe a part of his body would change, but that change could bring the freedom he had longed for. "I won't have to feel pain anymore," Eli asked, his voice hoarse, but his eyes now glimmering with a little more light. "That's right, Eli. We'll find the best solution so you won't feel pain. This is an important step, and I believe you'll feel much better after the treatment." Dr. Patel's words were like a soothing balm for Eli. He had waited for an opportunity to live without fighting against his body every day. And now finally that opportunity had come. That afternoon, Eli and Marcus returned home. Eli didn't say much, but inside, he felt something different. His worries about Vivian and her control seemed lighter. He was no longer just a silent child, no longer an invisible son in her eyes. He had the right to speak up, the right to decide his own life. As he entered the living room, Vivian was sitting on the couch, looking at her phone. She didn't bother to turn around when she heard Eli's footsteps, lost in her own world. But Eli knew that an unavoidable confrontation was about to happen. "Where have you been?" Vivian asked, her voice indifferent, without a trace of concern. Eli took a deep breath, then looked into Vivian's eyes. "Dad took me to see the doctor. We're getting a new prosthetic leg," he said, not hiding the determination in his voice. I don't want to live like this anymore. Vivian looked at Eli, her expression surprised for a moment, but it quickly changed to contempt. So what do you think about not having parents to take care of you anymore? She asked coldly. You can't do anything without me. Vivian's words hit Eli hard, but he didn't let the fear take over. He had his father now, and he had the right to make decisions for his own life. I don't need you anymore, Eli replied, his voice stronger than ever. I have my father, and I will live my way. Vivian fell silent, her eyes full of anger and resentment. But no longer was there any power that could make Eli afraid. She knew this time Eli had enough strength to stand up and fight. Eli turned and walked away, not looking back. He knew this battle wouldn't be easy, but one thing was certain this time, he wasn't fighting alone. The next morning, the atmosphere in the house was more tense than ever. Even though Eli now had his father on his side, he knew that the battle with Vivian was only just beginning. Vivian was not one to easily give up her power, especially now that she was starting to feel like she was losing control. Both Eli and Marcus knew that they weren't just fighting for Eli's freedom, but also for the truth that Vivian had been trying to conceal for all these years. Marcus had decided, after receiving all the latest medical reports about Eli's condition, to pursue a legal battle. He had prepared himself to face Vivian in court, but even so, he was still worried about the explosive tension between the two sides. Eli had become exhausted by living under Vivian's control, and now he needed to free himself from her. That morning, Marcus took Eli to meet with a lawyer, a man named David, who had been helping them prepare the case and strategies for the legal battle. Eli could sense the seriousness in his father's every move, but he also felt a bit of fear at the thought of having to face Vivian in such an official setting. He had never imagined things would escalate this far. David was an experienced lawyer, specializing in complex divorce cases and child custody disputes. He had worked with many families in similar situations, and he showed no fear about winning the case. However, he also admitted that the fight with Vivian wouldn't be easy. Eli, David said as Eli sat across from him in the office. We need you to be ready to speak the truth. If you don't speak up, no one will be able to help you. What you share will help us prove that Vivian is not fit to care for you. Eli looked at his father, then at David, feeling a rush of fear welling up inside him. I don't want to talk about Vivian, but I can't live like this anymore. Eli said, his voice choking with emotion. David nodded, understanding Eli's anxiety. You don't need to be afraid. The law will protect you. We will help you. After meeting with David, Marcus and Eli left the office. Eli's head spinning with everything he had just heard. He couldn't believe things had gotten to this point. But at the same time, he felt a glimmer of hope. He wasn't fighting alone anymore. He had his father, the support of a lawyer, and most importantly, the truth, the most powerful weapon. A few days later, the legal battle officially began. Vivian, unable to tolerate failure, easily hired an excellent lawyer to go up against Marcus. The battle wasn't confined to lawyer offices. It spilled into the courtroom, where details of the control and injustice Vivian had imposed on Eli would be revealed. Every word from Vivian, every piece of evidence, would be a challenge for both Eli and Marcus. At the courthouse, the atmosphere became tense as soon as the proceedings began. Vivian, in her elegant attire and confident demeanor, sat across from Marcus, her eyes full of defiance. She never imagined that her life would be confronted with such a serious challenge. But above all, Vivian couldn't accept that Marcus might win custody of Eli from her. David, representing Marcus, was the first to speak in the courtroom. He presented the medical reports on Eli's condition, showing results that confirmed the prosthetic leg Eli was using not only caused pain, but also exhibited signs of neglect and mistreatment. This evidence made it hard for Vivian to justify herself. Vivian Hart has done everything in her power to maintain control. David told the court, his gaze unwavering. However, in the process of raising Eli, she has neglected his health and development. We have sufficient evidence to prove that she is unfit to care for a child like Eli. Vivian, not willing to back down, stood up. She expressed her frustration and tried to deny all the allegations. "I am the only mother this boy has," Vivian exclaimed, her voice cold. "I've taken better care of my son than anyone else could. Marcus doesn't deserve to care for Eli. He wasn't there when his son needed him." Marcus couldn't sit still as Vivian continued her accusations. He stood up, his face stern, and said, "Vivian, I have done everything I can to take care of Eli. My son doesn't need your control anymore. I won't let you continue to harm him." Eli sat silently in the seat below, his eyes focused on his father. He could feel the tension in the air, but his father's determination gave him more courage. He couldn't endure Vivian's domination any longer. He was ready to speak the truth, to reclaim the right to live his life. "I've been in pain for so many years," Eli said, his voice echoing in the courtroom. Although still trembling, his words were strong. "She says everything is normal, but it's not. I don't want to live like this anymore. I want to be free." Eli's words silenced the room. All eyes were on him. This was the first time Eli had spoken out. The first time he shared his pain publicly, and the truth about Vivian was beginning to surface. The trial lasted for several weeks, and gradually irrefutable evidence was presented. Each day, Marcus and David scored small victories in this battle. The truth had finally triumphed over the lies Vivian had woven. No one doubted anymore how much Eli had suffered under Vivian's control. One day, as the trial was nearing its end, the judge finally delivered a ruling. After reviewing all the evidence and testimonies, the court has decided that custody of Eli will be granted to Mr. Marcus Hart. Mrs. Vivian Hart will no longer have the authority over Eli's health and well-being. This was a huge victory for Eli and Marcus. Vivian had no choice but to accept defeat. Eli's heart was filled with joy and relief. He had won. He had pushed the darkness out of his life. After the judge's ruling, a silence filled the courtroom. For Eli and Marcus, everything felt like it had been released. A part of them had escaped Vivian's control, but they also knew this battle wasn't fully over. Vivian was not one to easily relinquish her power. Eli's life wouldn't return to normal immediately. This victory was just the first step in the journey toward true freedom. As the judge left the bench and the parties began packing up documents, the atmosphere in the courtroom became bustling. Marcus stood next to Eli, holding his son's hand tightly. A gentle smile on his face, but the tension in his eyes hadn't completely disappeared. "We did it," Marcus whispered, his eyes moist as he looked at Eli. "We won." Eli looked at his father, feeling the steadiness and love in his words, but his heart still hadn't fully settled. He remembered the times he lived in loneliness, the long nights with only himself and the pain. Although this battle was over, he knew he would have to face many more challenges before he could truly feel free. At that moment, Vivian walked out from the other side of the courtroom, her eyes cold, but she couldn't hide her anger and disappointment. She still maintained her composed demeanor, but the tension in her body was undeniable. Vivian couldn't accept this defeat. She couldn't allow a weak child like Eli to overturn everything she had worked for. "We're not done here," Vivian said, her voice cold and threatening. Her gaze focused on Eli instead of Marcus. "You can't escape me so easily." Eli felt a chill run down his spine as Vivian spoke. That was the voice he had always known, the voice of a mother who seemed loving. But in reality, it was a voice of control, a toxic power that he had been unable to escape for so many years. But now he felt strength within himself, and that was something Vivian couldn't take away. He lifted his head, and although his heart was still pounding, his words were more certain than ever. "You no longer control me," Eli replied, his voice low but full of strength. "I have my father, and we will live the way we want." Vivian stared at Eli for a moment, her eyes seeming to pierce through him, but then she turned away without saying another word. Her footsteps echoed in the courtroom like a sad song full of disappointment and bitterness. When Vivian left the courthouse, Eli felt as if a huge weight had been lifted off his shoulders. There would still be many challenges ahead, but at least now, he had a part of the life he truly deserved. The next day, Marcus and Eli returned to their home. The atmosphere in the vast mansion was different from before. The tall walls, the luxurious rooms, these remained, but now they no longer felt cold and oppressive. Without Vivian, without the strict rules she had imposed on Eli's life for so many years, Eli felt like he was living again. But at the same time, he knew his life would never go back to what it was before. "What will we do next?" Dad Eli asked, his eyes looking to his father, seeking a clear direction for the future. Marcus looked at his son for a moment, a gentle and warm smile appearing on his face. "We'll do whatever you want, Eli. Now you can live freely, study, and do the things you love. No one will force you anymore." Eli heard those words, but a part of him still felt uncertain. He couldn't deny that his life had changed, but sometimes he still felt uneasy. Was freedom really what he wanted, when everything still felt so new? Even though his father had done everything to help him, Eli still had to face the fears within himself. That evening, when they sat down to dinner, Marcus didn't forget to ask Eli about his plans for the future. "What do you want to do next? Is there anything you feel like you haven't completed?" Eli thought for a moment, then replied, "I want to study well. I want to be someone who can help other kids, those who are going through the same thing I went through." Marcus nodded, his eyes filled with pride. "You will, Eli. You have a strong and brave heart. You'll not only change your own life, but also the lives of others." Eli felt the warmth in his father's words. He knew he hadn't been wrong to place his trust in this man. He didn't just have a father who protected him. He had a companion in life. And from now on, Eli would no longer be the weak child who always had to live under someone else's control. He would be stronger and more determined than ever before. A few days later, Eli went back to school. Yet he no longer felt the fear he once had. The curious stares from his classmates no longer made him uncomfortable. He walked into class with a new sense of confidence, as though he had just stepped out of the darkness into a world full of light. With the support of his father and real friends like Anna, Eli knew he had crossed an important threshold. But he also realized that even though the legal battle had ended, life would always present challenges, and he would have to continue fighting to protect the most valuable things to him: freedom, love, and the truth. Eli knew that every new day was an opportunity to start again. The day was clear and bright, the soft sunlight filtering through the windows, casting shadows on the walls of the Hart family's living room. Although the mansion still exuded luxury and grandeur to Eli, it no longer felt cold and distant. He no longer had to live under Vivian's control, no longer had to fear the tense arguments, the threats from her. He was free, and the feeling was so new that it almost felt unbelievable. He sat on the balcony, gazing out at the expansive garden outside. The rows of lush green trees swayed in the gentle breeze, while multicolored flowers bloomed as if welcoming the changes in his life. Eli knew that this freedom had not come easily. He had fought for a long time, faced many fears, mental pressures, and even a silent loneliness. But now, as all of that seemed to be behind him, Eli realized that he was the one who had taken control of his own life. Eli sat absent-mindedly, holding the wrench and the small star that Anna had given him. He gripped those small gifts tightly in his hand as a reminder that no matter how he walked through life, there would always be true friends standing by his side, helping him overcome every challenge. Anna and Miss Brooks had shown him what Vivian and those around him never could trust: an unconditional love. Since Vivian left, the atmosphere in the household had completely changed. Marcus no longer had to work day and night as he used to. He spent more time with Eli, not just as a father, but as a companion. They walked in the park, talked about everything in life, and most importantly, Marcus had regained his faith in life, in himself, and in his son. It was strange this change in their lives had started with a painful event, but it had ultimately led them to a hopeful future. That same day, Eli and Marcus had an important meeting at a small cafe in the city. Marcus had arranged to meet with several experts to discuss Eli's future. Not the doctors who had treated him before, but those who genuinely cared about his health and future, those who were not influenced by money or fame. When Marcus and Eli entered the cafe, a middle-aged man who appeared to be an orthopedic specialist stood up to greet them. He smiled warmly and shook Marcus's hand firmly. "Hello, Mr. Hart. I'm Dr. Patel. It's a pleasure to meet you and young Eli." Dr. Patel said, his eyes never leaving Eli. "We'll work together to make sure he can live a life free from any pain." Eli looked at the doctor with some hesitation, but couldn't hide the hope in his eyes. He was tired of the empty promises from the doctors before, but this time he felt a glimmer of hope. Marcus sat down looking at Dr. Patel. "I've seen what my son has been through, and I don't want anyone, whether it's a doctor or anyone else, to hurt him anymore. I want to know everything about how we can help Eli walk without pain." Dr. Patel nodded, fully understanding. "That's exactly what we aim to do. We'll help Eli get a new prosthetic leg, one that fits his body perfectly without the interference of anyone other than the experts. And there will be no more misadjustments like before." Eli felt a bit of relief hearing Dr. Patel's words. He no longer felt alone, no longer felt abandoned in his own body. He knew he had found a place where he wouldn't just be a patient, but a normal person, someone who had the right to live without pain, without fear. After the meeting, Eli and Marcus took a walk in the park, a place where Eli always felt peace, whenever he had a wide open space in front of him. This was one of the places Eli felt the most freedom in life, not because it was beautiful, but because it symbolized the change in his life. "Dad, I think I'm ready to move on," Eli said, his eyes gazing out at the clouds floating in the sky. "I don't want to live in the past anymore. I want to live for the present and the future." Marcus stopped, turned to look at Eli, and smiled gently. "I've always believed in you, Eli, and I know you'll do it. You won't just regain your freedom, but you'll help others find the same freedom too." Eli felt warmth spread through his chest. Not only did he have his father by his side, but also Anna, Miss Brooks, and those who had helped him throughout this journey. All of these people, those who had believed in him and stood by him, were his greatest source of strength. The next day, when Eli entered school, the curious glances from his classmates no longer made him uncomfortable. The children around him could see the change in him, not from his appearance, but from the confidence, the strength that he now exuded. He was no longer the weak boy, always living in fear. He was Eli Hart, the one who had overcome all the challenges, the one who had stood up for himself. Anna was waiting for him outside the schoolyard, waving at him. When Eli got closer, she smiled brightly, as if he had completely changed. "You're walking with more confidence now," Anna said, her eyes full of joy. Eli nodded, smiling lightly. "Thank you, Anna. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have been able to do this." Anna shrugged, but her gaze was full of pride. "We've fought together, Eli. I've always believed in you, no matter how hard things got." Eli looked into Anna's eyes and felt something he hadn't fully understood before. True friendship is when you can trust someone without needing to say much, just understanding and companionship. He and Anna hadn't just helped each other overcome challenges. Together, they had built a bright future. And Eli knew that this was the greatest victory he had ever achieved in his life. That evening, as Eli sat in his room holding the wrench and the small star in his hand, he reflected on everything that had happened. His life had completely changed. He no longer had to live under Vivian's control. He no longer had to endure the pain with each step. More importantly, he no longer felt alone. Eli looked out the window where the night sky was filled with stars. He smiled, feeling true freedom for the first time in his life. Not only had he been freed from the mental chains Vivian had placed on him, but he had also been given the freedom to choose the path he wanted to walk. And Eli knew that his journey wasn't over. Although this victory was a crucial turning point, there were still many things to be done. He would learn, he would grow, and he would never stop moving forward. And no matter what, Eli would never forget those who had helped him, the people who had given him the strength to live freely and happily. Eli Hart's story from now on would be a testament to all those who suffer in the darkness that they are never alone, and with a little courage they can find the light. The new day began with the first rays of sunlight streaming through the curtains of Eli's room, gently waking him from his deep sleep. Though the pain that once haunted each step had faded, Eli still felt he needed to get used to a new life, one without fear, oppression, and especially without loneliness. This was the time for him to start anew. Eli sat on the bed holding the wrench and the small star Anna had given him, keepsakes from a difficult period, yet full of memories. Looking at these items, he felt a strange strength, a power born from friendship and trust. It was this powerful motivation that would drive Eli forward, even though the road ahead might still be full of challenges. He stood up and walked over to the window, gazing outside. The garden was still filled with lush trees and colorful flowers bloomed under the sunlight. Everything around him seemed to smile, welcoming the changes in his life. He was no longer the wounded, weak child living in the shadow of harsh words. But now Eli was a strong, confident person with the right to choose his own life. That morning, Eli and Marcus decided to spend the weekend together, exploring new things in life. They drove to a nearby park where long, winding trails, lush green hills, and tranquil lakes awaited them. It was an open, free space where Eli could run without the pain that once held him back. Marcus looked at Eli with pride in his eyes. He no longer saw just the boy he had once loved, but a true warrior. This father had come to understand that love and support were not just words. They were actions. He had set aside important meetings and reports to spend time with his son. These were the moments that truly mattered. "You know, Dad, today I feel like I'm alive again." Eli said, his voice soft but full of determination. "I'm not afraid anymore. I don't have to pretend to be strong when I'm actually hurting. I feel like I can do anything now." Marcus smiled, placing his hand on Eli's shoulder. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone. You've been strong all along. From now on, I'll always be with you, helping you find your own way." They walked together along the winding trail, not speaking much, but in each other's presence they both felt the change in the air. These were the moments when Eli felt he was no longer alone, that he truly belonged to a family, a place where love and care were unconditional. Later that afternoon, back home, Eli received a message from Anna. She asked him about the walk they had taken that morning and said she was looking forward to seeing him. A warm smile spread across Eli's face as he read her message. He had gradually realized that not only did he have his father, but he also had sincere friends, always by his side, walking with him every step of the way. With Anna's support, Eli no longer felt like he was fighting alone. She was the one who had helped him rediscover himself. His first true friend who stood by him without expecting anything in return, only offering kindness and loyalty. The next morning, as Eli walked into school, the difference was immediately noticeable. No longer did he feel the mocking glances or the loneliness in his heart. The students around him now saw him differently, not with pity, but with respect. He was no longer the boy with the prosthetic leg. He was a real person, strong and full of hope. And then Anna appeared, always the first to greet Eli whenever he entered the classroom. They walked together down the hall, sharing light-hearted stories and secrets of youth. Anna had not just been a friend, but also a companion throughout Eli's challenging journey. That day, she and Eli sat together during lunch, and she smiled as she said, "Who knows, maybe one day we'll create something truly big, something the whole world will recognize. I'm sure a person like you, with everything you've been through, will do great things." Eli felt his heart warm. He didn't need to prove anything to anyone. The only thing he needed to do was to live true to himself, to live authentically with the things he believed in. And in that moment, Eli knew his life had changed forever, not because of external circumstances, but because of the transformation in his own heart. That evening, after a long day, Eli lay in bed holding the wrench and the small star. He smiled, feeling the peace he had regained. A new life was unfolding before him, filled with opportunities and hope. He was no longer a weak person. He had become the one who steered the course of his own life. And as the lights in the room dimmed, Eli closed his eyes and whispered to himself, "I will never back down. I will live the life I deserve." Outside, the stars continued to shine in the sky like promises of a bright future, a life of freedom and fulfillment that Eli had found. From loneliness to courage, from pain to hope. Eli's journey reminds us that we are never truly alone. No matter how heavy the burden, there is always a way to rise, especially when we have someone who believes in us. If Eli's story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and share it with someone who needs to hear this message today. And if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button to follow more inspiring stories like Eli's. Remember, no matter what challenges life throws at you, just like Eli, you can stand tall. Stay strong, stay kind, and keep believing in yourself. Until next time, take care and keep moving forward.